A man is sitting in his room at 2:47 a.m. The screen in front of him is bright enough to light the entire space. But he is not scrolling. He is not distracted. He is locked in something far quieter. A message he has written, deleted, rewritten, and left untouched. It is not complicated. He understands it completely. That is the problem. Because clarity does not always create movement. Sometimes it creates paralysis. Across the world, someone else is staring at a different screen. A resignation letter sits open in another tab. Another person replays the same sentence in their head for the 10th time before a conversation they will not initiate. Another sits in a parked car outside a building they have mentally already left. Different people, same moment. A pause that looks like thinking, but is actually something else entirely. We are taught a simple idea early in life. If you understand something clearly, you will act on it. But reality refuses to obey this rule. People stay in jobs they understand are draining them. They remain in relationships they can already describe as misaligned. They repeat habits they can fully explain as harmful. Awareness is not the missing ingredient. So what is? Because something very strange is happening here. People are not confused. They are paused. Most people imagine decisions as a rational process. A quiet internal courtroom. Logic argues one side, emotion argues the other, and one wins. But that model is too simple, because in real life, decisions are not evaluated by correctness. They are evaluated by survival continuity. The brain is not asking, what is the best choice? It is asking something far more primitive. Will I still recognize myself after this? And if the answer feels uncertain, the system freezes. Not out of confusion, out of protection. There is a moment most people never notice. When a decision becomes clear, but suddenly feels heavier instead of easier. That weight is not logic. It is identity resistance. Because inside every person exists multiple versions of themselves. The version that stayed quiet to avoid conflict. The version that tolerated things just to survive. The version that learned not to expect too much. These versions do not disappear when life changes. They stay active in the background. And when you attempt to move beyond them, they resist. Not because they are wrong, but because they once kept you safe. So the mind does something subtle. It delays, it postpones, it negotiates time, because time feels safer than transformation. And this is where the real pattern becomes uncomfortable. You don't delay decisions when the outcome doesn't change your identity. Replying to a message, choosing dinner, watching a video, no resistance. But the moment a decision forces you to become someone slightly different, something tightens internally. Because now it is not about the decision itself. It is about what version of you survives it. And suddenly, delay feels safer than clarity, even when clarity is already there. This mechanism does not stay in isolated moments. It spreads quietly across life. People stay in roles they outgrew long ago, because leaving would invalidate the identity they built there. They delay conversations because speaking would break the version of themselves that avoids discomfort. They postpone changes not because they lack discipline, but because discipline would force a new self to take over. So life slowly organizes itself around emotional familiarity instead of direction. And the strange part is, it still feels like choice, even when it is repetition. Avoidance does not remain neutral. It compounds. Every delayed action sends a quiet message to the brain. This is something we don't resolve. And the brain adapts. Next time, the resistance is stronger, not because the task changed, but because the identity boundary hardened. So a pattern forms. Delay brings relief, and relief makes the next delay easier to choose. And over time, the relief of avoidance becomes more addictive than the discomfort of action. So people don't just delay decisions, they start to identify as someone who delays. And that identity becomes self-reinforcing. And that is exactly what makes the next part so important. Because once that identity hardens, going back to the room at 2:47 a.m. looks different. Same screen, same message, same pause. At first, it looked like confusion, but it was never confusion. It was identity negotiation, a quiet internal question no one hears. Who do I become if I go through with this? Because every meaningful decision is not just about what changes outside you. It is about what version of you continues forward. And the brain is cautious with that moment.
Not because it is trying to hold you back, but because it cannot predict the self on the other side. So it chooses something safer. Delay. Not as failure, but as protection. But something changes the moment this pattern becomes visible. Because now the question is no longer, why can't I do this? It becomes, which version of me am I protecting by not moving? And that question changes the structure of hesitation. Not by removing fear, but by exposing what the fear is built around. The man at 2:47 a.m. does not suddenly become fearless, but he is no longer blind to the mechanism running the pause. And once you see it, delay stops feeling like confusion. It starts feeling like a decision.